Okay, wonderful. And thank you everyone for clicking whatever buttons Zoom may ask you to click. And I'm so glad to be passing it over to the wonderful Mariella. Thank you, Mariella, for leading us in the meditation today. Oh, and Mariella, happy July 1st. Happy
I was
July.
about to say that as it's July 1st. What a wonderful way to start a month.
That's right.
So happy July 1st, everyone. And so glad you're here. So we can begin our month practicing in community, meditating. So as we usually do, we're going to practice for about 20 minutes. So I would like to invite you to find a comfortable position, something that is relaxed, alert. As some of you already did, if you wish to turn your camera on, feel free to do that, or you can keep it on. Also, if you would like to close your eyes or simply lower the gaze. And I am going to begin the practice with a ring at the beginning of the practice and 3 times at the end of the practice. So you may want to use the sound of the bell as an invitation to start bringing all of your attention to this moment. Then you may want to start by taking a couple of deeper breaths. Taking deeper inhales and a deep exhale. Inviting the body to soften. With the exhale, releasing any tension that you are aware that is present right now. And bringing all of the attention to this moment, to the body being here. See if you need to make any adjustments to your posture. And as we start settling, maybe also taking a moment to orient yourself in the space you're in. You can do that by noticing the different sounds around you. Noticing smells. Feeling the temperature of the space you're in. And bringing all of your attention to the body. And noticing the different points of contact of the body with the chair, the cushion, the sofa, whatever object you are sitting or laying down on. Notice sensations in the back. Sensations in the sit bones area. Notice sensations in the legs and feeling the contact of the feet with the ground. It always bring in a sense of curiosity and a kind of tension. So just bringing all of your attention to this moment, the body being here, sensations in the body, maybe dropping down the shoulders and softening the jaw. And for the next few moments, just resting in awareness of what is it like to be human, to be inhabiting this body. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, just simply be here, acknowledging, allowing this moment to be as it is. This is what it feels like to be human right now. And it's all welcome here. See if you can feel the breath in the body, the natural rhythm of the breath, and direct your attention to the breath and placing the attention in whichever part of the body is the easiest for you to experience the breath. And bring curiosity and a kind attention. And feel the inhale and the exhale, the different characteristics of the breath. Very naturally, the mind will wander. And that's what the mind does. Nothing wrong with that. When you notice that that has happened, the mind drifting away, just very kindly bring the awareness back to the sensations in the body with each breath. Without judging the mind. See if you can feel the aliveness of this moment with each breath. Feeling how every moment is a fresh start. It's a fresh new moment. It's unique. This moment has never existed before and never will. We are just practicing being alive for it, alive for this moment, and this one, and this one. So, this is a moment to moment awareness. Just continue being curious about this moment, this experience. Perhaps by now the attention is a little bit more settled. And as the body continues to breathe, I would like to invite you to expand your attention to sensations in other parts of the body, bringing awareness to the whole entire body. And feel the body from head to toes. And once again, notice, what does it feel like to be human in this body? What's here present with you? With curiosity, noticing the sensations that are present in the physical body. They're all welcome in this space. I invite you to also welcome the thoughts, the phenomenon of the thinking mind, thoughts that arise and pass by. And inviting also emotions, different that emotions that are present, welcome them here in this space. This is all just phenomenon that arises and passes by. Very naturally, the mind wants to cling to some things, it wants to push away others. That's what the mind does, and we're cultivating neither attaching or pushing away, but holding space for them to move on their own, to arise, to pass by. As we notice that when we attach and push away, that creates suffering. But if we allow them to be here, allow them to move, pass by, like a cloud on the sky passing by, there is less suffering, more acceptance. And we do this very kindly, only to the best of our abilities. We also do this just one moment at a time. Maybe just for one moment, we can allow this moment, this experience to be exactly as it is. Whenever you encounter judgment, resistance, or even the attachment, we don't judge those experiences. We just simply hold them in awareness. Oh, a judgment, resistance is present. We don't resist the resistance. We don't judge the judgment. We hold awareness of these experiences. I invite you to allow what's present in this moment, allow it to be here. It's welcome. There is nothing wrong with it. Even that undesired thought is just a thought, but what makes it challenging is what we think about the thought. See if we can just hold it as a thought. Emotions, sensations. And always remembering if at any moment it feels too overwhelming to hold all of it, you can always just rest the attention in one single thing, like the breath. See if you can consider the idea that it's not you holding all of this experience, but awareness itself. But if there is this bigger field of awareness that is holding all of it, I'd like to invite you now to bring attention to the heart space and ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now? Maybe you want to place one or two hands in the chest area, the heart space. And as you ask yourself this question, I invite you to offer to yourself this one word or phrase that you need to hear right now, something that feels supported. It may be something like, I love you, I'm here for you. Will never abandon you. Accept you exactly as you are. Really feel into this experience of offering support to yourself. Notice what changes in the body. Perhaps there is a sense of ease, softness. Maybe. This is a very unique experience. I invite you to check in with yourself. And as we approach the end of this practice, this time together, I would like to end with inviting you to bring attention to gratitude. Find something that you can be grateful for in this moment. Perhaps a part of the body, a person, an event, an object, a pet, whatever that is, small or big. And just notice how gratitude feels in the body. Where in the body do you experience gratitude? Really allow yourself to be present, to feel gratitude. And also taking a moment and find gratitude for yourself for having made the time to be here and to be with you in this way. You could have been doing something completely different, but you chose to be here, to show up for yourself, to gift this time to yourself. And I invite you to honor that. It's not easy to sit with ourselves and with everything that it's present. It's easier to do and check out and do something different. So it's starting to feel to me like a heroic act, an act of self-love, radical love and radical acceptance for myself. Maybe this also resonates with you. When I ring the bell, I invite you to see if you can make the rest of your day a continuation of this practice where you continue to be present for your life, for this moment, with curiosity, with kindness, with a non-judgmental attitude. And when you're ready, you can start bringing movement to the body very gently without rushing, opening the eyes and letting light, colors, and shapes come to you. Thank you all for your practice, for being here, for meditating together. Such a beautiful thing to do. And I will pass it on to Brian, our wonderful, amazing, top world-renowned social worker. Brian, I need to find more, what do they call?
Oh,
Adjectives.
more adjectives is perfect. How
Yeah,
about my friend? That's
my friend,
that's
my
the adjective I love to hear.
yeah, I'm looking forward to our wonderful talk, Brian. So thank you all for being here and for practicing together.
Thanks so much, Mariella. Yeah, thank you. And thank you all. So glad that we all get to sit together, um, and with some guidance or like a guide. I used to think that it would be fun when I was a kid to go on a trip alone and decide I want to go to this place and museum and this coffee shop and then I tried it. It's first of all, it's hard. It's because there's so much to see, and there's people and then I tried doing it with a tour guides instead. I went with my grandma. We would go on these tours that had guides, and they would set the day. And that somebody would have an umbrella or a flag, and we would follow that person when we would go to the museum, and it was so much easier to have a guide traveling with a guide than traveling alone. As much fun as I thought, and it's like I'm a grown up, I don't need a guide. And for me, meditation is like that too. I tried it for all these years to meditate alone, 5 minutes a day, couldn't do it. 2 minutes a day, couldn't do it. And now on Saturdays with you, it's easier. Yeah, I don't quit as often. Yeah, but it's so nice to have a guide in life. And I mean, for sure with grief, which I don't get we don't get any education about that. Talk about feeling lost. So this is my way of saying thank you so much, Mariella, for being that guide and helping us, to keep on track and to bring us back, yeah, to center. So thank you, Mariella. And thank you all. Like I said, I'm so glad that we're all here together to practice coming home to ourselves, returning home, coming home to ourselves, and practicing taking good care of what's happening inside us, not fixing, not adjusting. Goodness knows we live in a society that tells us that we're not quite there yet. We're not quite right. And instead of that, to take care of, like a garden. Um, yeah, yeah. And then, of course, once we have been practicing taking care of the things that are happening inside us, tending our own home, our own garden, it certainly helps us to take better care of the things happening around us, which also includes the connections to the people that we've lost who still live inside us, but also tending that home. And there's a lot of people that live inside this home here. Later on today, I think I'm going to end my talk with a sentiment about something called the Heart Hotel, which is something a lot of people in the grief world talk about. Um, but anyways, so my talk is probably going to last about 12 to 15 minutes. So it's going to be somewhat brief because, as was discussed earlier in the check-ins, I think the most important thing here is connection. So instead of just one person talking for 30 minutes, I'll talk for about, 10 and 15 minutes, and then we'll turn off the recording and then we'll have community. But I'm really glad to be talking about something that I'm very passionate about. I care a lot about. I was terrified of death and dying and grief when I was a kid. And now I'm a grief therapist, which is interesting. Um, and to talk about grief and storytelling and connections. And also, I'm glad to share about the field and some theories and some ways of not just working with grief, that sounds very clinical, but being with grief, including continuing bonds. So I would like to start with two quotations. Let me just pull these up here. The first one is from the wonderful Katharine Hepburn, and she said this in 1990. We are required, I think, to be polite and considerate of others. This is a sort of social compact we have with each other. And very few people honor it, I might add. But here is the social compact as I see it. I'll stay out of your way, smiling all the time, and you stay out of mine. If I stumble or my tire goes flat, or I appear to be short of funds or food, I'll happily drop by and help out. But for the most part, you stay over there and I'll stay over here. And you'll learn as you live a bit longer that there are very few people who are really interested in who you are and what you're doing. That handful who do care, who do want to see you do well, these people are treasures and hold them very dear and very close. Forgive them almost anything. Be there for them. So that's the first quotation about the social compact. Everything's fine. Fine. How you doing? Fine. Fine. I'm fine. And the second quote here is by Elizabeth Gilbert, the American journalist and author, Eat, Pray, Love, among many other books. And this is what she said about grief. Grief does not obey your plans or your wishes. Grief will do whatever it wants to you, whenever it wants to. In that regard, grief has a lot in common with love. So the reason that I wanted to start with both of these quotes is to talk a little bit about, yes, grief and loss and how confusing it is and how lonely a walk this is for so many of us. We, every living thing will die. I used to think again when I was a kid, and maybe this is what scared me so much, that death was the opposite of life. And so I was trying to stay away from it. I really didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to read about it. I didn't want to see movies about it. And then over time, learning from others who were farther down the road than me, further, farther, farther, whatever, that death was a part of life, a part of. In fact, some people in my world, in the world of bereavement and grief and loss, the field of study is called thanatology, thanatology. And we see it as actually not the study of death and dying. Taking a step back, many people say that ours is the study of life with death included, with death a part of it. And yes, it's the one thing that unites us all. The one thing. There may be others. There may be others, but certainly this is the one thing that unites us all. For a long time, we believed, and I'm sure you all have experienced this, the sort of air that we've breathed. I've breathed it, that grief is something that's linear, right? It's a problem to be solved. And thank goodness, and we do owe a debt to some of you have heard about Kubler-Ross. So a wonderful research, really, really helpful and supportive. Her studies were looking at the stages of dying the stages that people, the experiences of people who were approaching their own death. And she found out that many people who were getting closer to the end of their lives were experiencing some common, had common experiences. For example, denial, very common as they approached their death. Another one that was very common was anger. Another one that was very common as people approached their own death was bargaining. Bargaining. Now, her research is and was extremely helpful. Her research has also expanded to include not only those people who were approaching their own death, but also using that same template, that same model, that same formula, and apply it to the grief experience for those who have lost someone. And so many of us believed and tried to fit, in some cases tried to even shoehorn our way in to, okay, I'm now in denial. And yes, as those of us who have lost someone, a person we cherish, an animal, and also this includes other uh, ambiguous losses. For example, living with someone who is experiencing dementia or someone who goes missing and they haven't been found yet. Julian Sands, the actor whose remains were just found a few days ago, there was many weeks where he was missing. And in these experiences of loss, we do feel denial. No, this isn't happening. This can't be right. Joan Didion's book, The Year of Magical Thinking, is a great example of this. For a year, she couldn't quite grasp that her husband was dead. And so I'm starting my brief talk here. I wanted to talk about this because we know now, and Kubler-Ross also in her own personal communication acknowledged as such that, yeah, grief is not a linear process. Grief is not something that we move through stages and then we complete it and then we finish it. If only, though. If only grief was something that we could get over. And I'd like to read a list of some of the things that we would like to get over. And this is a list that was compiled through, this is from the Center. Let me just find this in a wonderful organization here. It's these, where'd it go here? Oh, the Center for Living with Dying. The Center for Living with Dying. So along with uh, biological and physiological reactions to death, I think we've all heard stories, true stories, of best friends, siblings, uh, partners, one of whom dies and the other one dies shortly thereafter. There is an increase in uh, cardiovascular problems. The phenomenon is called broken heart syndrome, and it's true. It exists. But here are a list of the few feelings, some of the behaviors, some of the thoughts, some of the bodily reactions, excuse me, the body reactions. And these are the things that I would love to get over as fast as possible. Guilt, suicidal feelings, suicidal thoughts, substance use, substance abuse, strained relationships, inability to function at work or at home, depression, apathy. I just don't care. Anger, hostility, craziness, and the words of so many of us. And even though some of these words can have negative connotations, I've said that. I feel like I'm going crazy. Memories, flashbacks, sleep disturbances, eating changes, eating disorders, loss of belief, feeling shaky, loss of friends, loss of support system, yearning, missing, loneliness, isolation, disbelief, despair, physical pain, disorientation, sadness, numbness, anxiety and pain, gratitude, relief, feeling out of control. And these responses and these reactions are so human and so normal, but, and this is the but that the but that I'm hanging my talk on here. And I'm so grateful that I didn't think that it was okay to smile or laugh when talking about grief. And I owe such a huge debt to the grief groups I've been a part of and the individuals I've worked with and the therapists that have helped me with my grief, that it's okay to laugh sometimes. It's okay to smile. But the problem with all of these experiences, after it's almost like I've run out of time. My grandma who died, I ran out of time to resolve some issues with her. I ran out of time. And so those of us that are experiencing grief and loss, we do have such a difficulty in bridging that gap between the feelings that we're experiencing, the feelings and the thoughts, and sharing that with our friends and family who have not had the experiences of loss. It does become clear in our society that society pushes away our experience of grief and bereavement and death and dying. That list that I read, people get scared. People have been scared of me when I've talked about my pain, even though this is something that we all experience. And so there's all these stories that live inside us, exactly like Mariella, you shared in as you guided at the end, that is there something inside? Is there something inside that wants to be spoken, needs to be spoken? And for some of us, that there are sentiments, right? I remember my grandma used to say to me, I love you more than anything in the world. And this sentiment still lives inside me. But sometimes so I've tried to say that to people, but when they ask me, oh, where's your grandma right now? And I say, well, she died. uh, they change the subject. They say, "Oh, do you want to get lunch? I know it's only 10 o'clock, but 10 a.m. Do you want to get lunch?" I was like, "I wanted to tell you these stories that live inside us." Some of you have heard of this quote. Maybe you know who said it. Maybe you don't. Uh, Muriel Rukeyser, the not famous enough American poet and feminist and uh, wonderful person uh, who died the year before I was born. Some of you have heard this quote. The universe is made of stories, not of atoms. The universe is made of stories, not of atoms. And there's all these stories that need to be told. For example, when I was working at the crisis hotline many years ago, a woman called. Maybe one or two of you have heard this story. She called and she said, "Tomorrow's the anniversary of my father's death." And all week long, everyone knows how important my dad is to me. And every day, it seems like people are creeping away from me. Every day, it's like people are taking one step back from me. And tomorrow is the day of his birthday, his birthday, and no one will talk to me. No one will return my calls. People at work are treating me like a pariah. And and I asked her, "Are you having thoughts of suicide?" Because it's a suicide crisis hotline. And she said, "No." And she said, "I just want to say my dad's name. I just want to say his name. I want to say his name and I want to tell stories about him. I want people to know that he matters." And we talked about her dad for 20 or 30 minutes, and I'll never forget it. Um, Here's a story about my grandma, and I'll kind of wrap this up in a few minutes. I want to share a little bit about continuing bonds. And so if the linear fixing, moving, if the graduating from grief is no longer how we can be with it, and thank goodness, then what? But I wanted to share a story that for a long time nobody wanted to hear me share because they thought it was, well, they didn't want to hear it. And I could tell they didn't want to hear it. So right before my grandma died, the last thing she ever said to me, I went and I wanted to see her. I didn't expect that I would talk to her, but I went over and she was sleeping and she was resting. I think she took some, melatonin or something to help her rest with the pain. And my grandma was a fierce, fierce lady. And she loved me so much. It was almost like she sort of dumped all of the love that she couldn't express in her life. She sort of dumped it on me. Sometimes it really did feel like a dumping, but it was great. It was like swimming in a pool of love. Sometimes it was a pool of matzo ball soup. Sometimes it was ice cream. She was great. She, she raised me. along with my parents. So I wanted just to go and say goodbye, more of like a see goodbye, say goodbye. And when I went there, I think we all remember the days where there was landlines, these cell phones, ridiculous. Landlines is what is where it's at. Anyways, so I walked to her house and she had her phone and her voicemail, not her voicemail, excuse me, her answering machine. And she was so delighted with herself that she recorded a rhyming answering machine message. And she thought it was the cutest thing in the world. Her friends would call and she wouldn't answer. She would let it go to the answering machine. So the rhyming, hi, this is Eleanor. I'm not here. Leave a message. It was something like that. It was so sweet. And so I was standing over her bed and she was sleeping and I was just looking at her and I was saying my goodbye. And then the phone rang. And for those of us that know landlines, those suckers were loud, loud. Landlines were loud. And it startled her as she was sleeping. And I was a little scared because I knew that I was there to say goodbye. And I was standing over her bed when the landline rang. And she looked up and she saw me. Um, I think she may have loved me more than anyone. I mean, she loved her daughter, but there's something of, I really think that she may have loved me like I was right up there, the Mount Rushmore of people in her life. I think she loved me right up there. And so she saw my face, right? And she smiled and she said, "Oh, hi, Brian." And I said, "Hi, Grandma." And I was crying and smiling, kind of feeling like I am right now. And I go, she goes, "What's happening?" And I said, "Oh, you're sleeping. You're resting." And I said, "Isn't it nice to be able to sleep and rest?" And she said, "Yes, it's so nice. Sleeping has been so nice." She was in pain, you know. She goes, "Sleeping is so nice." And I said, um, and she said, "Oh, I took something to help me to sleep, melatonin or something." And I said, "That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you're able to sleep." And then this is the last thing that my grandma ever said to me. She was such a character. She said, I said, "Oh, I'm so glad that I was able to take that to go to sleep and rest." And she looks up at me and she said, "Brian, I hope I don't get addicted to those pills." And then she winked at me and then she went to sleep. And this funny moment of levity, because my grandma was always laughing. She was always, and again, she didn't laugh her whole life. It was almost like maybe she was saving up all this for me or something. And we spent every day together, almost every day together. And her last thing she said to me was, "I hope I don't get addicted to melatonin." And then she winked at me and she went to sleep. And she died, I think, the next day. And I've never really told that story like that, but because people don't want to hear it. Once they find out that someone had died, they get scared of us. And there are these stories that live inside us. And just to sort of, I know this is a topic that we could all talk about forever. And you know what? We have all been talking about this forever. This is the real topic. What is this life? What is this death? What happens after? Who are we? What is this all for? But I just want to wrap up by saying, thank goodness we've reached a point in our field, thanatology, the study of life with death included, ever since the mid late 90s. Some wonderful researchers, their last names were Klaas and Field, and they realized, along with everyone else, this linear graduating from grief thing doesn't work. It's for the birds, as my grandma would say. And so instead, they came up with a theory called the continuing bonds theory, continual bonds theory, which says it is not about moving on. It's not about graduating. It's not about keeping these stories to ourselves. It's not about locking them away in the basement of our home, the same home that Mariella, you were helping us practicing being present in this home. But instead, how do we let these stories out? How do we let these connections out? How do we let these tears out? How do we let these laughs out? How do we share them with other people? And yes, there's some people in the world who don't get it yet. They will. And so, how do we maintain this connection with the people we love across the divide of life and death, across the divide, across this divide of life and death. And for me and my grandma, I talk to her. I talk to her. I talk to her in the car. Sometimes, one time I was getting a massage, and for some reason she just came into my mind. And I learned about my grandma after she died. I learned her name, even though her name was Eleanor, nobody called her that. They called her Ellie. Ellie. And now I tell people that my grandma's real name for her was Ellie. And this sense of connection, this expression of feelings, the prayers we have, the writing letters, the writing letters to, the writing letters from, keeping the memories alive, carrying on the traditions. The matzo ball soup. Every time I have matzo balls, I think about my grandma. Uh, she would keep kind of like I would eat two, and then she would be, okay, you have to have a third. I eat third, you have to have a fourth. And I think about her. I was like, Grandma, no. I would say I'm full, but she wouldn't accept that I was full. And sometimes we look to and we yeah, we look to and look to and feel to these people that we love for guidance and support. What would my loved one, what would Eleanor, what would Grandma, what would Ellie have done in this situation? Would Ellie be okay with me telling that story? Yeah, I think she would. And so the concept of continuing bonds recognizes that grief, yes, is very personal, very individualized, and it's the relationship with our loved ones that evolves over time. We can continue to grow this relationship. For many people, it's a relationship that continues to grow. And it validates that grief is a lifelong process. We don't have to graduate from it. We stay connected and close to the people that we cherish. It views this relationship as a resource. It views this relationship as inspiration. It views this relationship as a welcomed presence. It's part of finding and constructing meaning. How interesting, this post-grief growth that some of us have been through. Post-grief growth, what is possible now that wasn't possible before? And she's still here with me. And there's many people that are still with me here. And I'd like to end this talk that has gone on 6 minutes too long with a quote about something called the Heart Hotel. And I think a lot of you will get this. So this is from actually a client who shared about this. So this is from a client who talked about a client at the center I discussed that was published with her permission. My heart is like a hotel. Everyone I love has a room in my heart hotel. When they die or go away, no one can take their room in my heart hotel. I can fill up the empty room with the love and the memories that neither death nor separation can take away. However, I can add new rooms to my heart hotel as I meet new people to love and care for. So the work of grief, and maybe grief and love are two sides of the same coin. So this work, this tending our home, this garden, to in time, perhaps to let go of the pain, perhaps in time to let go of the trauma and the 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 anger and the fear of grief and this connection that we have with each other. And tomorrow at Benedict Canyon, some of us will be practicing this. The work of grief is to let go of the pain and to keep the love, keep the memories, keep the good times. And thank goodness we don't have to do it alone, even though our society is scared of grief. Certainly capitalism says you got to go it alone. So we've got a lot of things pushing up against us. But when we find each other, when we find our tribe, um, when we find our tribe. Um, Last thing here, and then I'll turn off the recording. Um, there are animals that are in packs, wolves and others, and we're finally able to, like a wolf, when we, this howl, this cry, this wail, this howl. And when we find others who can hear that howl for what it is, we find our tribe, we find our herd. And then in this community of connection, uh, we can heal, we can grow, we can love. And so thanks so much for listening to my stories. I'm really glad I got to share about my grandma, who's a character, a lifelong square dancer. She had all these petticoats. Oh my goodness, what a character. So with that, I will turn off the recording and thanks so much.